Yes, Bill.
Okay, welcome everyone to the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of September 9th, 2024. Just to remind everyone that members of the public can be present in the council committee room during the meeting, and also public members can observe the meeting via Zoom off the City of Trail website. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and the recommendation is that the agenda for the Governance and Operations Committee meeting be adopted as presented. Thank you. Councillor Martin, seconder, please. Councillor Cashel, all those in favor? Carried unanimously.
I was not unanimous.
Sorry?
I wasn't unanimous.
Sorry?
I was not unanimous. I
Oh,
voted no.
sorry, Councillor Benson. Thank you. Did you want to comment on that, or?
I was just hoping I could make a motion to defer item 3.2 to a future meeting when staff has, or I guess that's my motion.
Okay. Is there,
Point of order, I would suggest that motion come forward when we are dealing with that.
Oh, okay. I will do that.
okay, thank you. Okay, so, Bev, do you still want to stay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Thank you. So we have two delegations this afternoon, and the first one on the agenda is Sergeant Mike Wasenowicz with the first quarter and second quarter crime statistics. Welcome, Sergeant Wasenowicz.
Thanks for having me. I'll start, if there's no questions or anything, I'll start with the first quarter. So for January, February, and March of 2024, things stayed fairly steady. One thing we've seen a significant drop in is theft from motor vehicles. They were in the hundreds every year. Now, last quarter there was 4. So, it's pretty much insignificant. Considering how easy of a crime it is to commit and get away with, that's significant. And I think it's mostly due to people realizing we don't live in the same world as, they maybe remember back before. They're removing stuff from their car and locking it overnight. They're still letting people leave their keys in their car, leave stuff in their car, so it still happens. Most of the theft of vehicles are because people have left their keys in their car or in an easy accessible place. And it's very difficult to steal a car without the keys. And that's what we find, unless it's an older car before they had those types of security, basically encryption and key encryption. Unfortunately, drug investigations remain down because of decriminalization. A lot of drug investigations were initiated through possession of drugs and then turned into possession for the purpose of trafficking or trafficking investigations. So that continues to be a challenge in this environment to keep those going, because we do find there's a strong correlation between criminality and drug trafficking. The people we're generally targeting prolific offenders are people involved in violence, generally involved in either the use of or trafficking of drugs. But overall, total calls for service were down, total criminal code files were down, total property offenses were down, and other criminal code, which is just a generic thing, slightly up, but then violent offenses were down. And violent offenses being down is always a good thing, because violence tends to have the most impact on the community. With traffic and impaired investigations, they did drop significantly, but there were members out looking for them. Sometimes you find right after Christmas, or people are very wary that the police are out there looking, so we see less incidents. As summer comes along, spring and summer, people drink and go out more to the lakes and stuff like that, and we end up catching more. Collisions stayed about the same, and the number of violations were about the same. For community category, we did see an uptick in mental health related calls, but I have to say 52 calls for mental health related stuff in the first quarter of 2023 would be considered lower than normal. So about 77 is probably around average. Files involving alcohol and drugs, those seem to be on the upswing, but in the area of decriminalization, we're dealing with that constantly. People drinking, using drugs, or a combination of both in public and getting reported on. Domestic violence files are only 3, but it's considered very low, but obviously 0 would be the perfect number. And then these categories I generally lump together: check well-being, suspicious occurrence, and unspecified assist. Were lower in 2 categories in about half. So basically during the pandemic, these 3 categories, we saw a huge upswing, and now they seem to be lowering back to more pre-COVID levels. Check well-beings continue because I think after the pandemic, a number of people discovered the police would check on their spouses or relatives or family members that may be in trouble, and people are much more aware about mental health issues, drug issues, things like that. So they do call us quite often. Sometimes the EHS is called, but generally we're involved if there's any type of safety risk. And less suspicious occurrences than unspecified assist, because people are out there living their lives again rather than being at home worried about things they see around their house and neighborhood. Any questions on the first quarter?
Has there been an uptick, or is it just, it feels like there's been a lot more motorcycle accidents this year than
Yeah.
in the past, or is it just more communicated?
No, I think there's been an uptick. We've had a number of fatals,
Yeah.
which was strange for us, because normally like fatals usually involve vehicles, not motorcycles.
Yeah.
But I think what's happened, the popularity of motorcycling has gone way up. And most of the incidents, not most, a lot more incidents this year with motorcycles. Like just on the weekend, we had a minor collision, but normally like we would see 1 or 2 of those a year, but it seems like it's not just here, it's province-wide. So
Okay.
there must just be kind of like a critical mass out there.
Yeah.
And because more people are riding bikes in nice weather, and nice weather has a big thing to do with it, we tend to see more accidents.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? So I'll bring to the last quarter, April, May, and June. We're almost getting to the end of the third quarter, end of September, but assaults were down over 50%. It's excellent. What we do find, assaults are mostly occurring on the street between vulnerable population, people in the vulnerable population, but those dropped. Sexual offenses, which are things like sexual assaults, were up from 7 to 13. 13 is still not a very high number, and we are increasing we're decreasing the barriers for reporting. I've spoken about this before, but in particular to trail's unique this way. Other detachments in the Kootenays and maybe perhaps further out than that, I'm not entirely sure. Instead of storing sexual assault examination kits at the detachment, we do it at the hospital. So people can attend the hospital, get a kit done, and not involve the police. Sometimes people don't report or don't get an examination done, so they're not ready to report to the police yet they still want to collect valuable evidence. The other thing is there's a reduced wait time. Sometimes because we would have to transport the sex assault kit from the detachment to the hospitals, it could be several hours if we were tied up in the urgent call. So now there's no barrier that way. The hospital will also store the kit for up to a year while that person decides whether or not to make a decision to report to the police. After a year though, it's either disposal of the kit or giving it to the person. The evidentiary value would be much diminished if they gave it back to the person to get the exam rather than the police, but it's more about providing an opportunity. What we find is when people report these things years later and there's no evidence, no corroborating physical evidence or other evidence, it's just one story versus another, they tend to turn into issues about consent or whether or not it happened. That can be very tough on the victim. So it's nice to know that we give them a bit of a breathing space of a year in order for them to decide what to do, and we're hoping that within that year, that extra time, they can come forward and report to us if it's occurred. So we anticipate those numbers may continue to go up in the sense that more people are reporting, which is a good thing.
So Mike, I just have a quick question on that, please. So do they differentiate between housed and unhoused when they're doing the testing for the sexual assault?
No, the hospital will just do it, like the kit contains X amount of forensic tests or collection kits, those are completed and turned over to us. There's no differentiation between them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember when we were doing the cooling center, there was a lot of discussion about sexual assaults on the streets at that time. And obviously, it's not showing in this report at this time, but we were getting a lot of conversations about that. And even if, I was just wondering if they went to the hospital, would we know if they were from the streets or if they were?
If they report to us, we can tell
Mhm.
like where they're from. If we get a kit from the hospital and they're willing to disclose their information, yes. What we found during that period, because we do get reports, however, we didn't have anyone reporting to us, and we didn't collect, we weren't able to substantiate any charges, or maybe there was some rumors about somebody going down there and being particularly predatory on women. We're not saying it didn't happen, but we
Yeah.
couldn't find the person they were describing, and they were distinctive. So we're not entirely sure what's happened, but we encourage the report coming forward. There is some issues with people on the street with mental health issues, drug issues, sometimes consent issues, sometimes, like there's extra factors that make it challenging to get them to come talk to the police and substantiate their claims. So it can be very challenging, and it's something to be said to give people, especially women on the street, a safe spot where they can protect themselves against them, because it's just another thing they have to deal with over and above, let's say, men on the street, because they are very vulnerable. And sometimes, there is sexual money exchanges, and that can get very complicated depending on what was agreed upon and what was actually done. And those get very tough to prove.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Robberies were down. Robberies are just basically theft with violence. Auto thefts, break and enters were down over 50%. Sometimes those break and enters, auto thefts really depend on who's in town. We do have people who steal cars. We do have people who break into places and steal things. So sometimes when those people are out of town or in jail, we do see a drop. Theft from motor vehicles were at 20, but again, historically they would be at 100, so they've gone way down. And again, drug investigations are at an all-time low. So we do see a drop in the third quarter as well in violent offenses, property crime, other criminal code, and overall criminal code. So we're seeing about 85% when compared to the same quarter last year. And then calls for service were around 83%. So slightly slower quarter than we've had before. If we go to traffic and affairs, vehicle collisions remain about the same. Thankfully, no fatals in that quarter. And everything else is pretty much approximate, though number of violations was down a bit. Mental health calls for community-related stats. Mental health calls were down, but again, files involving alcohol and drugs are up in this decriminalized environment. That's not unexpected. Domestic violence files were down by 10. Some of these stats, though, are from multiple incidents. So you can get spikes in the stats if you have one person or a couple that has a number of incidents. Sometimes it can take a long time to get out of a bad relationship. And then check well-being, suspicious persons vehicle occurrences, unspecified assist. Overall as a group, we're down 70% from the previous quarter, just showing a reflection. It's returning to kind of pre-COVID levels. Any questions about the second quarter? Okay, any questions overall about stats or policing questions?
Any questions? I don't see anybody. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cashel. That was a
Let's
slow
see,
hand.
the perpetual question, Sergeant Wasinowicz, that I think you get asked, and I'm not sure what you can share with us today, but I'm sure it's on the minds of a lot of our constituents, and that is just, can you give us any kind of update on staffing?
We have two recruits for their call. So they spend 6 months working with another officer until they become basically first level constables or past their probationary or recruit field training period. They both start working totally independently in the next month or two. In addition, we have one member coming back to work full-time. And then we had one corporal leave on sick leave, and we have a promotion running competition, so anticipate the next couple months, we'll have another supervisor back on board, and there's another recruit coming. We're just waiting to hear who it is. So we have been prioritized. I think that this council, mayor, CAOs, all been engaged in that, and it is having a direct effect. When you talk to the head of E-Division, Dwayne McDonald, it does come back through the channels, and they have been working on it. It's just, we're all competing for the same people. So experienced people and new recruits, because we're also short, and policing took a huge dip for COVID for recruiting, that now we're catching up to speed, but everybody wants the same person. We have had a few unusual challenge, like accidents, like some, like 2 members sustained physical injuries, like through work, and there's nothing much you can do about that. Another one is working on rehab and getting back to work full time. So sometimes it's just luck of the draw. Someone breaks their leg, or someone hurts their shoulder or back, and they have to go through the medical procedures or therapy to come back to work. But for the most part, I think I'm waiting till about Christmas. I think we'll be on the upswing. But yeah, it's just a slow process, and once you lose someone, it can be very tough to replace them or get them back fully functioning in a reasonable amount of time. So.
Thank you. I appreciate you and your uniform members that do show up every day. You know, I know it's got to be tremendously stressful working with short staffing. So
yeah.
I want to pass that appreciation on for
Thank
sure.
you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hansen has a question. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having trouble connecting here. Oh, there we go. I just was wondering, Sergeant, is the individuals that aren't able to be back at full swing, are they able to do such things as surveillance for warrants, any of that kind of work? While they're not necessarily being out in the field, they're able to do something that's, you know, taking some pressure off of their other cohorts?
Yes, we have 3 members working full-time, but recovering from injury, and then, but they do work in the office, including taking files and providing office support. There is a lot of those types of requirements, and it is helpful. We always want to see officers back in uniform on the street, though, because that's like what we need them for. But there's a few people at home who aren't working at all. One's due for retirement, the other one's talking retirement, or 2 other are talking retirement. So it's a slow process, but we're hoping to transition from people who, maybe need to move on to the next career or can't get a specialized position within the RCMP, not specialized, but a position suited for your abilities. And some of those choices will be coming up soon for some of those members who can't return to full duty. But that again takes a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I did have one more question, if it was okay, if there was no one else that had a question at the moment. Is there any more clarification around your enforcement regarding public drug use, how that's been changed with Health Canada? I know the last time there was some questions about, you're waiting for it to come down from the top, exactly what you can, what does sheltering in place mean? So I was just wondering if there's been some clarification from your superiors about exactly what can and can't be done when we find individuals in the doorways, areas within 50 feet of an entrance, just so that there's clarification for the community about what you can and cannot do right now.
I think the only clear way of enforcing drug possession and trafficking is vehicles are clear, like you can't, basically it's not vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
The shelter in place doesn't make a lot of sense. It basically means anybody, you could crouch down on the sidewalk and be sheltering in place. That's the issue, is that it's very unclear. Vehicles, yes. Everything else is kind of a toss-up. It's depending on the circumstances. What we find though is drug possession wasn't something heavily pursued before, unless it was paired with more serious offenses or another offense. So we're focusing more on breaches, curfews, conditions, enforcement, things like that. And usually accomplishes the same thing, though. when drugs were illegal, it was much more simple, and drug use wasn't so public. Like it's an unfortunate trade-off. You're gonna treat it like a medical issue, it's just gonna be in your face every day. Yeah. From what I've seen.
Okay. Any other questions from council?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Sergeant.
We did have a question about the toy run, though. I thought we were gonna
Oh,
have a
yes.
conversation about that, please, because
I'll
we're,
bring you up to date.
okay,
because
getting
this
a
is-
lot of emails about that and complaints and,
This is strange because the Tory Run has been running seamlessly for years, and it was taken over by a different person. It's a big task. That person was under the impression that they were allowed to block intersections and red lights and break traffic laws. That's never happened before in a Tory Run, and it doesn't happen now, just because you can't. There's no authority to allow a civilian group to do that, and it's very dangerous. So 2 years ago, one of my officers was working, saw them doing this, stopped and said, "You can't," and they stopped right away. I discussed it with the head of the Tory Run, and he was under the impression that that was allowed and it had been happening. I said, no. If you want to block off a highway or do traffic control on a highway, you need authority and permission from MOT, and I directed him to them, and he never bothered because he realized it was going to be too much trouble, and I don't think you would get it. Then I wasn't ever entirely clear about what his objectives or what he actually decided, but he wanted to do a parade route through the City of Trail on a Saturday. And I said, well, it's going to be very challenging to have the City of Trail put all those resources in place on Saturday for like basically motorbikes driving through trail. They believe that, maybe more people would come out and do more donations if Trail participated, but again, that was up to that organizer to organize that. From my understanding, that didn't happen. Last year, we didn't hear a peep from the Tory Run. This year, it seems to be an issue because they want to go back to blocking intersections. They're just not allowed to. So I don't know if the people who run the Tory Run are aware of this kind of feedback, but the City of Trail basically has nothing to do with it. And I've told the head of the Tory Run that, and anybody else who's willing to call and do some research, the provincial highways MOT's responsibility. The police cannot authorize them to shut down intersections for a bike ride. Like it would cause chaos. And someone would likely get run over because they were using volunteers with experience, which I don't know what that meant, to block intersections, and you can't do that. You're gonna get yourself killed. So it was better just for people to stop. Like there's so much driving around here that doesn't have lights. And slowing down through town and letting people see is not necessarily a bad thing, stopping at lights. But I think some people had their idea that they were going to basically do this uninterrupted loop. And I understand from their perspective, it'd be fun for the riders, but it's not legal nor practical and not safe. So I don't know why people are coming here because they were directed to Administrative Transportation. It had nothing to do with the City of Trail. Yeah. So I don't really understand what was going on there.
and I just wanted to make sure that was clear because it never came to city council. We had no decision on that toy run made around this table. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I talked to the organizer, he didn't really express a lot of interest in organizing it because he realized it was going to be way too much trouble to do something that was going to last literally a minute or two.
Okay.
Like basically block off all the streets downtown, to have people loop through, timed with the run. Like it was, I don't know. I think where they started in Castlegar, the city provided some traffic control, but that's very different than a total shutdown of the city, right?
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Councillor
Thank
Cashel.
you. Yeah, well, that was
Thank
my
you.
question is, the social media backlash on this has been significant. And the optics look very poorly for council and mayor, and I appreciate your comments. But going forward, I'm just looking at Castlegar did have flaggers. I know that it says, this is an email that came in from a participant in the run that was circulated just today, I believe. Castlegar had flaggers, first responders, and a pace vehicle to get everybody through town. Nelson and Baker Street shut down with the fire department and their police to ensure safety. not only for the riders, but spectators. Selmo Fire Department cooked food, Roslyn, did something to support them as well. So, in that whole loop, there's one municipality that's glaringly missing from it. And I'm just wondering, going forward, maybe we could collectively work with these other agencies and come up with a plan so that we're not the black sheep in the whole operation, right? Because it's a toy run for children, and when you get comments on social media that we're not supporting children, I mean, I take that pretty serious, right? And I know all of us do. It's just, I'm hoping going forward, maybe we can work with our other municipalities and come up with some kind of a game plan so that we're in the play, not out of it. Does that make sense?
I would have to say, with the discussion in the toy run 2 years ago, expressing the dissatisfaction with police and then not following up with council, trail, RCMP, like I didn't get a call about any type of participation. I think we were in their black book, and this is unfortunately not really anything to do with us. If they're not going to organize something with the city of Trail, RCMP, fire department, what are we supposed to do? I didn't find out about this till Wednesday, and then it's not fair to do that. So I think it's a bit silly. It's nothing really to do with anybody in this room. If you have a charitable organization that's about children, why are you starting this fight? It's about kids. It's not about blame. It's bizarre. I've never dealt with another volunteer organization that is creating visceral towards the police, fire, ambulance, in the town because, quote, we're not for children. Like, I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. And unfortunately, this is my experience with this group or with the leadership in this group, that it's your fault if you don't give them what they want versus let's sit down at the table and organize this and make it work for everybody. So, maybe they should just avoid trail then. If it's going to be that big a deal, and leave us out of it. There's plenty of routes in trail, around trail. Sorry, that's my opinion.
Okay. Councillor Martin.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with Councillor Cashwell. I think moving forward, and I've sent an email to everyone here regarding maybe the possibility of having some type of meeting moving forward. Maybe we can get to a common ground. Maybe we can, but we don't know until we try. Now, it's just a suggestion, and I received this from Ms. Bowler earlier, from Nicole Brown, who's the manager of legislative services in Castlegar. Bear with me, I'll just read it quickly here. The Toy Run hired their own flaggers in Castlegar, Thunderbird Traffic Control, and they had Cindy, the owner of Thunderbird, confirm this and provide a traffic plan. So they provided a traffic plan, which is required. Fire department provided a lead car to escort them through town. Not sure if this is normal. Sam, the fire chief, was asked last minute on Friday and agreed. So again, last minute, they came to him last minute. I noticed in an email to the fire department, the organizer said that they had issues again with permit process in Castlegar. So they're having the same issues in Castlegar, which was not true on our end because obviously there wasn't communication. The issue was with the requirements for certified traffic control, not just somebody who says they've had some past experience, as is required by us, insurance, and the Ministry of Transportation. So I think this is common for everybody as we move forward, and I would like to see if everybody's interested in moving forward, because I've talked to Ms. Butler about having a conversation with all municipalities who have been involved in this to see if we can get something. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. I don't know. You're absolutely right. Like, they gotta follow the rules. It's a great organization, like what their cause is, not their organization, but their cause, but I think we gotta try.
And I think it has to do with experience, and if they sit down at the table with all of us and they go to work, and remember, police officers have been involved with this before, including riding police motorbikes, because this stretches back for years, as well as I've had personal involvement with people involved in it before. So I just don't understand where this is coming from. Like, I think maybe there's some miscommunication out there that could be solved with exactly what you said.
Okay. Councillor Cashel, we do have to move on. We have another delegation here, so quick question.
But I'm very succinct. I'm thinking maybe a press release on our end to kind of, would that be appropriate or necessary? Just to say that we've received complaints, we understand the concerns, and going forward, we'll try and work with other neighborhoods. I don't know, I'm just thinking of a press release on this particular issue. Is it something that's worthwhile? That's my question. I would make a motion to make one, but I have to take staff's advice on that as well.
We can just take the clip out of Sergeant and put that on the media release.
I don't approve that.
I would probably reach out to the head of the Tory Run and see if we'll come in and talk to council about what they're gonna accomplish and what they need. Rather than a media release, because
Mhm.
we have done nothing wrong. I don't understand why you put it out. Like we wouldn't, like, you know, I go, we work with so many different groups and provide volunteer opportunities, like we just did Pride Parade. I came in on my day off, like, no issues, but we need a plan, we need to be notified.
Just to be clear, I'm not being critical of
No.
your position on this either, Sergeant. I
No, I think
appreciate
I'm
it.
just irritated because we would love to work with them.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't understand why in today's world, people get criticized for non-participation when they're not asked. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Sergeant Wasanowicz. We have one more question here from Councillor Wilson, and then we have to move on.
And I'll be really quick. Is there a possibility to make a donation to the toy run? Do they accept donations like that?
Well, I'm sure they do, and I'm pretty sure they have a website too that you can go in and check out. And there's a box on the website there where you can go in and donate if you want.
Okay. I think I'll
Yeah.
look for that.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're going to move on. Thank you again, Sergeant Wasanowicz, and thanks for coming today. And we will move on to our second delegation, and that is Juliet Craig from the Kootenai Conservation Program.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me online? I assume so through the owl, right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate your time. I wanted to come and tell you a little bit about the local conservation fund service. So this isn't an ask of any kind. It's just an information sharing about this kind of unique local government service. And I'm the program director of the Kootenai Conservation Program, and we work in the traditional unceded territories of the Ktunaxa, Sinixt, Secwepemc, and Syilx peoples. Now, I'm doing page down, that's not working. I got it. I think you might have to use this. Oh, there we are. Okay. On this side. Great. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about what a local conservation fund service is, how it's established, what the role is of my program, the Kootenai Conservation Program, and the recent interest in the expansion of this service. So Kootenai Conservation Program is a partnership we formed in 2002, so we're over 20 years old. We formed in the Columbia Valley of the Regional District of East Kootenai, and then in 2012 expanded to include the West Kootenai. And we're a broad partnership that includes local, provincial, federal governments, a slew of nonprofit societies from land trust to fish and wildlife clubs to stewardship groups, educational institutions, and agricultural producers who are all working towards conservation in the Kootenays. And our mandate is to coordinate and facilitate landscape level and local conservation efforts, focusing on private lands to share conservation knowledge and expertise and build support and resources for this effort. So part of the support that's required to have good practices on private land in terms of private land conservation and stewardship is funding for that kind of work. So in the early days of the Kootenai Conservation Program, the organizations and residents of the Columbia Valley saw unprecedented growth, and they were concerned about the valley bottom ecosystems. They were concerned about the large farms and the open grasslands and the wetlands and the rapid development. And they put their heads together and thought, I wonder if residents in this valley would pay to conserve the values that we all care about here, our fish, our habitat, our water, and our farmland. And so they put it to referendum and called it the Local Conservation Fund in 2008, and it passed by referendum to have landowners pay $20 per parcel per year into a dedicated fund held by the regional district that's used to support projects. And then in 2014, the Regional District of Central Kootenai brought the same service to referendum. The market research polling and work that we had commissioned done prior indicated residents of the West Kootenai would pay $15 per parcel per year. Went to referendum around Kootenai Lake in electoral areas A, D, and E of the RDCK, and it passed in 2014. So to date, it's issued 50 grants and over $600,000 towards different projects on Kootenai Lake. So how it works, like any other local government service, is there's a tax line item that says local conservation fund service. It's $15 per parcel. It goes into a separate pot within the regional district. If municipalities participate, it goes into the same pot. It's just collective for the service in that region. And then nonprofit organizations or First Nations can apply to the fund like any other granting. The proposals are reviewed by a panel of volunteer experts from the area who hold a lot of knowledge about conservation and resources. They make recommendations to the elected officials who ultimately decide which projects to fund in the area. And so, as I mentioned, it's a pooled service. So all the municipalities or electoral areas, it goes into one pot. So it tends to work out geographically over time. But the idea is we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same area. So there's a lot of projects that have been funded by this service. You can go to our website at kootenaiconservation.ca. There's snapshots of each of the projects, little descriptions of them, and even little videos about them. So just some examples is the grizzly bear coexistence solutions. It works with private landowners to install grizzly bear or electric fencing in areas that are corridors for grizzly bears. So it helps protect livestock, fruit trees, and also protect grizzly bears. And it's rare to find funding on private land. Generally speaking, Columbia Basin Trust and other funders don't support projects on private land. So that's why this is filling a really unique niche. It's been used by invasive species societies to help mitigate the impacts of invasive plants and 50-50 cost share with landowners with invasive plants on their property. It's been used to help landowners create pollinator meadows, and we know pollinators are important both for our native plants and ecosystems, but also for agricultural production. It's been used to acquire ecologically significant properties. So this is an example of the upland slope of Cottonwood Lake outside Nelson, but also the Donut Hole in Darkwoods Conservation Area just northwest of Creston as well. It's been used by groups to monitor water, both quality and quantity of water, and it gives real-time information to local governments, for example, to help make decisions around water, especially in the context of climate change. It's been used for a variety of restoration projects. This is an example of Sunshine Bay Regional Park in Harrop, creating wetlands, which we know is extremely important for our local wildlife, for climate mitigation and other values. It's been used by Fish and Wildlife Club in Invermere, who moved a culvert that was blocking kokanee salmon movement. And so for the first time in anyone's memory, kokanee salmon went up that stream. It's been used for dry forest restoration, which is important for forest health, and as we know, also for reducing fire impact to communities. So it's basically helping support projects that are important locally and locally driven to local organizations and helping our local values. It also has extreme economic benefits, and that's been really evident where every dollar that like say a resident's $15 generates $75, because these projects then attract matching funding or in-kind support and help bring that money to the region, which is for jobs and materials and supplies, and boat drivers, all kinds of things for the projects. And I noticed the RDKB strategic priorities, there's on climate actions, environmental sustainability, fostering relationships and community well-being. So this type of service would support all those goals in the strategic priorities. So our role as the Kootenai Conservation Program is we work in partnership with local governments. So we do the intake of proposals, we monitor projects, we help coordinate the technical review, we do make sure the final reporting's in order, and we take that administrative burden off the local government. So we have agreements with both the RDCK and RDEK, and it's 9% of the requisition for the services that we offer. And we really take that relationship seriously with local governments. We host field tours so elected officials can see the projects on the ground. We do a lot of community presentations or media and ways to get the information out. And so this has been such a successful service that the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen established this service in 2016, and the Regional District of North Okanagan in 2020. And there's local governments all through BC looking at this, saying we really want this in our region. We heard this in the West Kootenay as well, and residents of the Silcan Valley were extremely interested in this service. and the director agreed to let it go to referendum. So the RDCK hosted that in 2022, quite shockingly, 2.5 years, 2 years after the pandemic, and it passed by 66%, which is a very high number for a referendum to pass. In electoral area F on the west arm of Kootenay Lake, they use the alternative approval process, which I think maybe you're familiar with, where you state that you're going to, your intention is to implement the service, and then if 10% or more of the electorate writes in that they don't want it, you can consider public consent. So in that area, they would have had a requirement for 338 signatures, and they got 1 in opposition. So overwhelming support. So the steps to establish it this is the first one, just letting you know it exists and telling you about it. I've got some documents and information, and I can send an email after with some links. We always have, before all 3 referendums, commissioned market research polling to have a really confidence sense that the electorate is supportive of the service before the effort of a referendum. And then assembling the leadership team and just identifying the process, and then eventually establishing the service. So I'm just in here in step 1 of sharing information. And you can find out so much more on our website at kootenayconservation.ca. There's a whole tab on local conservation funds, including what they are, videos of projects, the frequently asked questions, 2-pager, and all kinds of other information. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I do have I've got a couple of these booklets. I don't know if you have a library here or not, but it's all online about local conservation funds. A couple of booklets about Kootenay Conservation Program, what we've done in 20 years. This is the executive summary of this. And then these are little brochures that show some of the examples of organizations in the Lower Columbia that help promote private land stewardship. So I don't know if I should just leave them with you, or if you want any paper, or if you want links.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So any questions from council? Go ahead, Councilor Pasha.
Hi, thank you, Lois. Excellent report. And are you targeting to partner up with the regional districts or the municipalities? And do you have any partnerships with municipalities?
Yeah, so in the Columbia Valley, all 3 municipalities joined the service at the same time. So it's Meridian, Invermere, and Canal Flats, as well as electoral areas F and G of the RDEK. In the central Kootenay, the municipalities haven't joined yet. We did do delegations to the municipalities of the Slocan Valley. The city of Nelson is very interested. They're deciding whether or not they want to establish their own service or join the RDCKs, sort of the pros and cons of both. So yes, it can be for both.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I feel like you kind of rushed through that.
Sorry, I was aware of my 10 minutes.
Yeah. But you know what? That was a lot of really good information that you shared really quickly. And for me, it's very helpful because when we have, citizens come in and ask us for help and support or money towards, these ideas that you shared today, now we know where we can send them. I think it's a great idea. It's a great program. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, you can't send them to the local conservation fund outside of Trail because it's
Right.
only for the service where the requisition's collected. So currently, there isn't this service in the RDKB or any of the municipalities.
Oh, okay.
So right now, it's only in the RDCK and those areas that have joined, and same within the regional district of East Kootenay. So it would take establishing the service in the RDKB and associated municipalities to have this funding source for projects like this.
Okay.
So what's the next step in making that happen then? Where does that
Well,
go?
we've done delegations to Fruitvale and Rossland, and we'll be going to the RDKB, and I know there's Montrose and Warfield as well, because we realized we worked with the RDEK for a long time, then we had long close relationships with the RDCK, so we've never worked with the RDKB. So our market research polling has never included the RDKB. So we're hopeful to look for funding for market research polling. That would be the next step if there was even interest. So our first step is if everyone flat out said this isn't something we'd ever be interested in, then we wouldn't bother trying to find funding for market research polling. But if there is interest, that would be the next step to try to gauge if this is something residents in this area would be interested in. Because of the error in this type of polling, the geographic areas need to be lumped. So we couldn't say specifically that Trail was interested or Rossland or electoral area A or B. So we have to kind of do these zones to have good high level of prediction. But it was really good because they predicted 67% support in the Slocan Valley and the referendum was 66%. So it will take some time to gather those funds for the market research polling, but we hope then if we did that, then we would come back to the delegation to say, yes, your area is likely interested, or no, it's not at this time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is there any questions from council? No? Okay.
Okay,
you
well,
very
thank you
much
very
for
much
coming
for
in
having
today.
me. These are all.
Oh, sorry.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda under communications is the application for temporary commercial use permit. And I will pass it on to Ms. Lucchini.
Yes, as you will see in the reporting before you, there is a business being operated out of a former church building in East Trail near the middle school. The name of the business is Dirty to Purdy Pet Grooming. 3 years ago, she applied for a temporary commercial use permit in that location because the property is not currently zoned for commercial use. Those permits can be issued for up to 3 years and can be renewed once for a further period of 3 years. The property has been recently purchased by what is called the Warfield Church. They haven't decided what their intention is for the property. They're thinking that they might be repurposing it, and she would have to move her business in any event, but she wants to renew the permit for 3 years, which buys her some time until that occurs. As well, there's been absolutely no issues with this business operating out of the basement of this building. She has a very good online presence and a very large clientele. Seems to be a very well-liked pet groomer in our community. So the recommendation before you is that council authorize the renewal of a temporary commercial use permit to allow the continued operation of Dirty to Purdy Pet Grooming on the property located at 1650 McLean Street for a further 3 years.
I'll make that one.
Thank you, Councillor Cashel. Councillor Martin, second. Okay, any questions or comments? No, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Great name. You can't even say it without smiling.
Item 3.2, the Lower Lookout Reservoir Roof Replacement Project. I'm Ms. Butler or Mr. McClure.
Oh, yes, I mean, this project, we noted it in the second quarter financial update to council that was presented on August 19th, and that we had, we're seeing that the quote coming in to actually get the work done was higher than what was budgeted for the year. We also noted that we've got a couple other water projects that either aren't moving forward or are under budget. So the water fund in itself, the fund is for water projects. So the idea that if we need to get this one done and you're shifting on another one should allow us to be able to do that. There is a concern, we want to get this project done, the roof replaced before winter time comes. And so hence the manager bringing it forward, and unfortunately I was detained on in the time frame to be able to get this in front of council. So it did come in late, so I do apologize for that. The project in itself, they're hoping if they can do this, it's done, by the end of October, before we get snow. Last year, I think we were fortunate because we do not have a big snow year. This year, if we have a regular snow year or a larger snow year, there could be concern if we don't move forward with it. Where does that push the timeline for the project? So I would be happy to take any questions that council may have.
Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Benson.
Just given that we received the report late, I haven't had time to review it, so I would like to make a motion to defer it. Just with it being this price tag, I don't feel comfortable voting on something without reading Mr. Spears' report and your comments even on it, so.
Okay. Yep.
But I make that motion.
I would second that.
So, sorry, Councillor Castle, you're seconding it, the motion?
Yes.
Okay,
Again, the only thing I would speak to it is that I don't know where that pushing it off 2 weeks pushes us another 2 weeks into winter and getting the project done. That's all.
Ms. Butler?
Your worship, through the council, we can bring this back if our motion is to refer to the next regular meeting, and then we miss that 2-week break, if that would be acceptable. So instead of bringing it back to GOC and then having to wait another 2 weeks for it to go to the following regular, we could just put it on the regular agenda for next week, or next council meeting of the 23rd. And then we will not miss that 2-week period, if that's agreeable. So it's a motion to refer to the next regular meeting of council.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and that's to refer it to the next regular council meeting of September 23rd. Okay,
And I'll second that.
yeah,
And then
all
you
those
vote.
in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the grants and aids, and the 4.1 is a graded trail minor hockey request for rental waiver of $2,274. Councillor Benson, is there a seconder, please? Councillor Martin, any questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Item 4.2 is the Trail and District Senior Citizens Villa Society. And there's a request for a cash grant of $20,000. And I'm wondering, Mr. McClure, do you want to talk about that,
Certainly.
please, before we
Yeah.
go to the vote?
Yes, it was unfortunate. The chair of the seniors came to see me. They were of the understanding, or they are of the understanding, that they got their approval and they moved on trying to find locations for the people that need to move out of the building, and have signed leases and have done that work. Only to find out from BC Housing that they're not allowed, or they can't use the funding that they would be using on the relocation because they don't have the final approval. So he came and asked me, what are some options for the city? I suggested a number of things. One, as I said, you can put forward an application for a grant and aid. I said there also could be the potential of a loan if that would help out. So that was some of the discussions that we had. He's brought forward a ask for a cash donation from council. The other thing that happened is that when I had the opportunity to speak with BC Housing when they were here the other day, I did take this up with the proponent that was helping out with this capital project. This was under their responsibility, but it had moved, and he confirmed that he would follow up to find out how fast they could move towards getting the approval portion completed, so as to not create a hardship for the senior villa to again, to be paying sort of like, not only losing money because they don't have the rent and they've got costs going for the current operation because it's not being torn down, but also paying for the higher leases that they have for these people that they've relocated. So I haven't heard back from him, but I also know that we will be at UBCM next week, and I certainly plan to raise this with the Mr. Ravon there when we're at that meeting as well. But that's why it's in front of you. So I don't know if council has any questions of me.
Yeah, it's a big ask, and I don't know that, I mean, first of all, where did they come up with the 20,000? What's the equation on that? My other concern, I mean, I love this project, the Villa. I mean, they're doubling capacity. It's a wonderful project, and I certainly don't want to do anything to impede its progress. But if I'm reading this right, we're being asked to supplement or help with the rents of the 11 tenants. So we're subsidizing rent for 11 tenants.
I would believe that's a correct statement.
Well, and I appreciate the predicament they're in, but I can also state that there's many, many individuals in our city that could probably also use a subsidy for their rent. And I just, without more information, like maybe the metrics or the equation as to how they came with the 20 and maybe just a further, I'm just not comfortable, unfortunately, approving this as much as I love the concept. And I just don't know if I have enough information to make the approval at this particular point in time.
And I would be, yeah, no, I appreciate the concern. One thing I would be curious about too, because he didn't come back, was just about sort of a loan, right? A way for us to be able to help them while they, get this, the funding approved, and so then it would be something they could pay back, maybe like a low interest loan or no interest loan, maybe, sort of thing. I just don't know where council's interested. I had talked to him about it, and then of course it just sort of came in as the application. We talked about different options on that. So.
Have we done that in the past?
I don't know for sure.
You can do that for improvement areas.
Right.
So I'm thinking you could do something like this advertised over a longer period of time and add it to the property taxes for a period of time.
Well,
so like you did in Green Gables.
Right.
Water
There's
extensions
there is options like that. Yeah, I didn't think about that per se, but
I think I would definitely agree with Councillor Cashell's dissertation.
Yeah, and I think when I spoke to him, he was again a bit flustered in trying to get this news and thought everything was moving along, and know that he was going to other parties, and as which I think is noted in his.
I think it's also important to also mention that I think the assumption that where BC Housing has fallen short on their commitments to the Trail Village Society, and I think my understanding is that this has been pulled back sort of after the fact, and it is disappointing to hear that information.
Yeah. So it sounds like at this point in time, just not speaking for council, but there's more information required, which I think that we could probably bring back to the next meeting, and or a different way of maybe getting, and then we'll also at that time be able to have spoken with the minister and just sort of display, our concern with the group, because it's a good meeting group, and they've been working hard. And as Councillor Castro said, I think I told him everyone's excited about this. I said, I'm not sure what you're going to come forward with, but they want to support, but also give me maybe a bit more understanding of where these calculations came from. I understand that completely.
Do they ever tell us how much money they get from the community grant from BC Gaming?
As far as the
It just says we have received a community.
Right. Yeah.
We don't know how much it is.
Fair. I didn't see necessarily anything in the the revenue itself. I did notice grants and other was up at 173. So what portion is that? I don't know. Yeah. Okay. But again, these are some questions I could certainly take back to the Village Society.
So would someone like to make a motion to defer it then to the next meeting? Thank you, Councillor Martin and Councillor Benson. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item 5.5 is resolution to adjourn the Governance and Operations Committee portion of the meeting and immediately resolve into in-camera meeting, and the recommendation is that pursuant to section 90 of the community charter, the public be excluded from the meeting as subject matter being considered relates to the following: the community charter section 91C, community charter section 91E, the community charter section 91G, and the community charter section 91L. So is there someone to make that motion? Councillor Butler, all those in favor? Thank you. Carried unanimously.
I just need to count.